Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Medina, and I am the COO and co-founder of Results for America. Thank you for joining today's Local Infrastructure Hub session to learn more about the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, a critical federal-state partnership that provides financing to communities for water quality projects. Today, we'll hear from federal government officials, policy experts, and a panel of mayors to discuss how the revolving fund can be used in tandem with other federal programs, to learn about other eligible projects, and more. But first, I'm pleased to welcome Zach Schafer, Senior Advisor in the Office of Water in the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, who will provide us with background information on the revolving fund and discuss various project ideas. Zach, thanks for joining us. The Zoom is yours.
Thank you very much. And okay to share my screen now?
Go for it.
All right. All right. Apologies, I'm having some technical difficulties, so I will. Well, apologies. I'm pulling the slides back up. All right, well, apparently Microsoft PowerPoint does not cooperate with my computer today, so I'll just be brief, and then I'm glad to deal with any particulars in the Q&A. But first of all, David, and to the rest of the Results for America and the Bloomberg team and everybody else on, thanks for this invitation to join. I'm Senior Advisor to Assistant Administrator Radhika Fox here at EPA's Office of Water, and we are absolutely thrilled to be supporting the administration and implementation of more than $50 billion worth of infrastructure investments, thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law, to President Biden's leadership, and to bipartisan action in Congress. And we know that much of that funding is hitting the ground now in communities like yours and becoming available in states around the country, primarily through the state revolving loan funds. And we are glad to be able to give this update on where we are and talk a little bit about the Clean Water SRF program. So EPA is one of the core water infrastructure financing agencies across the federal government. And the SRF programs, the state revolving funds, are an important federal-state partnership that bring these resources to states and to local communities around the country. Just as a recap, the bipartisan infrastructure law delivered just under $12 billion in additional funding to the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund. That's on top of annual funds that we generally get from Congress every year. And that's in addition to more than $12 billion in drinking water SRF supplemental funding, $15 billion dedicated to removing lead pipes, $10 billion dedicated to addressing emerging contaminants like PFAS, in drinking water and in wastewater, as well as several billion more going to our geographic programs, our national estuary programs, and other programs at EPA that help conserve, restore, and protect some of the most treasured water bodies in our nation and the communities that rely on them. So the Clean Water SRF, sorry, I'm flipping through some. So the Clean Water SRF has been around for 35 years now and has over 46,000 loans signed, which is to say that this is a pretty long-established program that many communities have leveraged. We, in our bipartisan infrastructure law implementation, are really targeting expanding, though, that pool of applicants and successful applicants who are leveraging this important source of funding. We funded over $163 billion worth of projects for a variety of purposes, including not just loans, but forgivable loans or similar to grants that make this funding particularly accessible for many communities that might not be able to afford loan repayments. Just a quick note on the process of how the SRFs work is that these are funds that EPA distributes to states to invest through their state revolving loan fund programs. Communities apply to their state for funding. through what's called a capital, and the states receive a capitalization grant from EPA. The role of communities is to develop a project and an application with the goal of getting on a state's intended use plan. And then the state will put that intended use plan out for public comment. And then once that comment period is over, it comes to EPA for us to perform an oversight role and to approve. And then we issue that capitalization grant to the states, and they can start getting that funding out to communities on the intended use plan. And that happens in some states on a rolling basis, in some states it's on a set schedule, and each state has its own SRF or its own financing authority. It sometimes is the same authority for the drinking water SRF and the clean water SRF. But we have a resource page on our website, which I'm happy to share through Results for America, that lists the programs and the key points of contact in each state for your SRF programs for you to learn more there. Just a little bit on the roles and responsibilities. So EPA, again, awards and manages capitalization grants to states and provides training to states. We develop guidance and provide technical support, and we conduct programmatic and financial oversight. It's the states who establish priority setting systems based upon state needs, solicit projects based on state priorities. They set disadvantaged community definitions and affordability criteria, though we are working with states and have provided some suggestions and recommendations in our guidance for bill funds to states on how to potentially update their definitions of disadvantaged community and their affordability criteria, since many states have not looked at those definitions for quite some time, and this is a great opportunity to revisit that. States set loan terms, and they manage the day-to-day operations of the SRF programs, including managing the loan portfolios and ensuring the long-term financial health of the SRFs. So with respect to the clean water SRF, even more so than the drinking water SRF, there are many, many projects eligible for clean water SRF funding, from centralized wastewater treatment plants, what we generally think of as wastewater treatment, to climate resiliency and hazard mitigation projects, energy conservation and water conservation projects, water reuse, decentralized wastewater, stormwater management. These resources can be used for planning and assessments, for agricultural best management practices that improve water quality, and a range of other kinds of projects, with the goal, since these are authorized under the Clean Water Act, of improving water quality. The eligible recipients of funds under the Clean Water SRF include, of course, municipalities, intermunicipal or interstate organizations and state agencies, but also nonprofit entities, private or for-profit entities in some states, watershed groups in some states, community groups, and even in some cases, homeowners associations and individuals. Again, some of those later ones depend on your state's particular SRF programs and their authorities. And that particularly comes into play when we're thinking about things like decentralized wastewater, like septic systems, and making improvements there. Projects are selected based on obviously determining their eligibility, both as recipient and the kind of project. Each state has a distinct solicitation process. So again, the application submittal and timing and frequency may vary from state to state. And states score and rank applications in a priority order based on their prioritization method. So it's really important to be in contact with your state SRF program to learn the unique characteristics of the program and what they're looking for, in addition to looking at our bill implementation guidance, to look at the priorities that we're setting for the program, and the other federal requirements that come into play on these loans, such as Davis-Bacon prevailing wage laws, or compliance with things like the Federal Flood Risk Management Standard, or the Build America, Buy America Act, and American Iron and Steel requirements. I'm just, before I wrap up, wanted to talk a little bit about our Water Technical Assistance Program. We really are centering our implementation of the bipartisan infrastructure law around expanding access to these programs, making sure that no communities are counted out based on a lack of familiarity with either the program, the application process, or just the technical, financial, or managerial capacity to develop for and develop applications for these funds and compete for them. We've developed over the last several months, really since bill's been passed, one of the largest technical assistance programs in the history of the Environmental Protection Agency. So we've announced $200 million in technical assistance that will support technical assistance providers working directly with communities in every region around the country, and several or national environmental finance centers or TA providers who will be supporting communities based on a range of different topics and priorities. We're working to provide services like planning and assessment, project development, support with partnerships and engagement, and program management support that communities can use to really get a step ahead in their application development process, their project design process, or identifying the needs that they need to meet in the first place, and then developing that competitive application that ensures that they have the best shot at securing funding through these programs. Who's eligible to receive EPA water technical assistance? So local governments and communities, drinking water utilities and systems, wastewater utilities and systems, stormwater systems, states, tribes, and territories, and non-governmental organizations specifically with respect to clean water SRF financing. I'm going to share this link as well in the chat, but it's epa.gov/waterTA. And this is our point of entry for communities or water systems who want to learn more, who have a need they want to talk to someone at EPA about. This is our portal through which we collect those requests and then identify the right regional or TA provider contact to respond to that request and begin the process of engaging with the community to understand what its needs are and what we can do to support them. So with that, I'm going to hit pause, and I apologize for the slides not working directly, but I will be able to share them afterward, and I'd be happy to answer any questions from the group.
That's great, Zach. Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll work with you to get your presentation out to everybody. I also want to encourage everyone to look at the chat because we posted the SRF contacts in each state for your reference. We've also posted the list of eligible SRF projects there for everyone, and that'll also be on our website. We already have a couple of questions, Zach. First, can you elaborate on how states have changed or updated their definitions of disadvantaged communities that you referenced earlier?
Sure. Well, and one of the things that it's a great question. So by statute, states have the responsibility and the authority to set their own definitions of disadvantaged community under the Safe Drinking Water Act and under the Clean Water Act. And in our implementation, we've worked to recommend that states revisit those definitions, especially in states where they may not have looked at those definitions for, in some cases, decades, and make sure that they're aligned with the current demographic trends of their states, the current, the financial demographics of the state, and are really meeting the needs of communities and water systems that they serve. So in our bill implementation guidance that we published in March 2022, we provided a little appendix that had some recommendations of criteria that states could use or consider as they revisit those definitions. And we're excited that more than half of states have made adjustments to their disadvantaged criteria or their affordability criteria or disadvantaged community definitions, since the implementation of the bipartisan infrastructure law. It varies to what extent or exactly how they're shifting those definitions from state to state, and I'd be happy to get you more information on the particulars for your state if that's of interest.
Great, thanks, Zach. Another question, how should SRF recipients engage in community outreach? What tactics and strategies do you all recommend to make sure that the hardest hit are engaged in the process from beginning to end? Well,
there's a few ways to answer that, and or not a few ways to answer. There's a few different stages at which engagement is really important. One of the places where engagement is really important is from the SRFs to communities, throughout the SRF application process. And so that public comment period, for instance, on the IUP is really an important place for states and communities to talk to each other about projects that are represented on it or not. And it's important for states or for communities to engage early and often with their states on projects. So that's one area of community engagement in that direction. It's also important to have community engagement in the other direction. As communities and water systems are thinking about needs, developing applications, the stronger the community engagement is, the stronger that application and that project is going to be. And that will show through, or should show through, on the application that the community or the water system makes to their state. And so the stronger that project can demonstrate the community need and community support for the project, the stronger the case that project will have as it fights for funding on the state's IUP.
Great. We now have a question from Melissa Schmitz from the city of Green Bay. Melissa, can you unmute yourself?
Sure. Hi. So my question is regarding green stormwater infrastructure. City of Green Bay is in a fairly large planning phase right now to create a citywide green infrastructure plan for stormwater. And we're wondering if that is eligible under the SRF.
So it's a great question. I'm glad you asked. So one of the great features of the Clean Water SRF and the Drinking Water SRF in a more voluntary way is the what's called the Green Project Reserve, which is that 10% of each state's clean water state revolving fund resources each year are designated as reserved to the extent that there are applicants applying for funds for these purposes for green infrastructure projects. And that includes green infrastructure for stormwater. Now, some of that may depend on what the very particulars of the project are, and I'd want to make sure that we connect you with the right folks in our EPA region or in the relevant environmental finance center. But broadly, yes, we are green infrastructure, nature-based solutions, and we know that that's distinct from climate adaptation infrastructure and practices, but very connected to it, are absolutely priorities of our implementation. And so we really encourage water systems and communities to think about how they can use the SRFs to achieve green infrastructure and nature-based solution goals.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Zach. We now have a question from Mark from Philadelphia. Mark?
Good afternoon. Actually, I have two questions, but they're not related together. The first one is, we are the 6th largest city in the country and the 5th largest water department. Is there anything that's precluding us from being able to put in an application for water TA?
I would want to follow up with you and with our water TA system. There are some eligibility requirements to make sure that support is being prioritized to the communities in need the most. But depending on what your questions are, there may be other folks at EPA who can help, who we can connect you with to help answer your particular questions.
This would be specifically to do with lead service line replacements and inventorying that have been mandated.
Yeah, why don't we touch base afterward and we can figure out how to we'd be more than happy to talk with Philadelphia about your lead service line questions and how to leverage the SRF set aside and drinking water SRF general funds through the bill.
Great, thank you. The other question is, how is Justice 40 going forward going to impact the EPA's granting capabilities? And what I'm saying by that is, what are the is it something that if we're going to pick an application to put a grant in for, is it an overriding element that we need to be very cognizant of going forward? Is this a mandate basically?
So the way Justice 40, my understanding is that the Justice 40 initiative isn't putting the burden on certain communities to figure out how they fit into the initiative. This is for those who may not be familiar with Justice 40, Justice 40 is the administration's commitment, which we're supporting across EPA and in many programs, from the SRFs to our place-based programs and many others. to ensure that 40% of the benefits of infrastructure investments flow to disadvantaged communities. In the case of the SRS, we're in the the fortunate position of that 49%. One of the points I should have covered is that thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law, 49% of the those additional clean water SRF funds, as well as the additional drinking water SRF funds, have to go to disadvantaged communities as either as grants or forgivable loans. So the SRF programs, by the design or by the intent of Congress and by how we're implementing them through at EPA, are already exceeding the goals of the Justice 40 program or initiative, and we hope to serve even that these funds benefit even more than 49% of or that even more than 49% of the funds flow to disadvantaged communities. But I'm not sure there's particular implementation considerations on your end as a community that you would need to consider in your application process. But if there's any questions you have on that, I'd be happy to take that after the webinar.
Thanks, Zach. I'll ask a question from Brian Sanders. Is there an approximate percentage breakdown of funding going towards grants versus forgivable loans versus loans? Just curious as we try to consider and pursue all options that do not carry debt service that increase the burden on customers.
No, that's a very important question. So as I just shared, the way that Congress wrote this funding into the bipartisan infrastructure law. So the general supplemental SRF funds for both the drinking water SRF and the clean water SRF, as well as the lead service line replacement funds, those $15 billion. So we're talking about close to $40 billion of the SRF funds flow. At least 49% of those funds must go to disadvantaged communities as grants or forgivable loans. So again, a lot of this will depend on your state's definition of disadvantaged community and whether or not your water system, your community meets those affordability criteria or that definition. And states also have the opportunity, they have the flexibility to implement their programs in different ways. So they may blend loans and grants, or loans and forgivable loans with non-forgivable loans. They may decide to forgive loans at a later date. So it's a slightly more complicated answer to what we wish was a simple question, but as a top line number, 49% states in each state, 49% of those bill funds have to go out as grants or forgivable loans. For the emerging contaminants pots of funding, it's 100% of those funds will go out as grants. On the drinking water side, 25% are required to go to disadvantaged communities. And there's another program that's, I didn't mention it because we're focused on the clean water SRF, but there's a new emerging contaminants for small or disadvantaged communities grant program to address things like PFAS in drinking water, which 100% of those funds, again, must go to small or disadvantaged communities, and they will all go out as principal forgiveness loans or grants.
Great, thank you, Zach. And one last question from our chat. Can you elaborate on the timeline for the TA services being made available? It's the impression in the field that a lot of it is still being built out.
So it is still building out, but it is out in the field now. And I know that we've got some TA providers on this call. I see a few of them on the screen. So yeah, this is definitely a ramp up to a very high and very long standing plateau that we'll be reaching. But we are rolling out those services now. So again, I mentioned that website, epa.gov/waterTA. And that that is a live website now that you can go to help to request TA, and someone from EPA will reach out to you. The other thing is to also and through the website here, you can also find our list of environmental finance centers. We have environmental finance centers, as I mentioned, in every EPA region. And we have several national environmental finance centers, including the U.S. Water Alliance. I see Mami on the call. Hello. And as well as several media or topic-specific environmental finance centers. So And you can always reach directly out to the EFCs as well. So it is a ramp up, but those services are starting to roll out now.
Great. Well, Zach, thanks for your presentation today. Thanks for taking these questions from our participants today. Want to note for everyone that we just posted a list of the TA additional background that Zach was just talking about in the chat. And that'll also be on our website soon. So Zach, thanks so much.
Again, thank you for the opportunity, and look forward to any of your questions as they come in.
Great. And before I introduce our next speakers, we're going to launch a Zoom poll with some questions about how you all have engaged with the Clean Water State Revolving Fund to date. So please take a moment to answer those polling questions now. These questions are important to us and will inform how we support all of you with these sessions moving forward. So please take the poll now. Okay, as some of you are wrapping that polling up, I would now like to introduce Mami Hara, CEO of the U.S. Water Alliance, and Paula Conolly, Director of Local Engagement and Senior Advisor for Distributed Infrastructure, also at the U.S. Water Alliance, who are here to share their perspectives on the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. Welcome, Mami and Paula. The Zoom is yours.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you to all the hosts and attendees for having us here. I'll just give a little introduction to Paula and myself and our EFC and some of the lessons learned that we have gained in our experience working in a pilot prior to becoming an EFC. As David said, I'm CEO of the U.S. Water Alliance and also former CEO of Seattle Public Utilities. And I have been very fortunate to have worked with Paula in a few different iterations when we were both at Philadelphia Water in developing the Green Infrastructure Leadership Exchange, and now at the U.S. Water Alliance and our Environmental Finance Center. And our Finance Center is available to help cities and towns across the nation, like the other national EFCs are, with accessing drinking water and clean water funding and with technical assistance. And we and the rest of our team have kind of almost an embarrassing number of years of experience with community planning and investment from multiple seats as funders, decision makers, and advisors. And through our experience on both the EPA pilot community solution teams and now as an EFC, we are working on a very kind of community a planning perspective in our work. And we've been asked to share very briefly about our lessons learned in that work, and Paula will get us started.
Sure, thank you, Mami. So really pleasure to be here and to see all of you and to be asked to say a few words. We've been asked to frame our lessons from two perspectives, one from a community equity and partners perspective, and then also from advice on how we might engage states better based on our experience. So I'll kick things off. Mami and I are going to tag team. I'll kick things off with a few sort of lessons that we've developed based on our community-centric approach to investments. And this doesn't necessarily just apply to Clean Water SRF. This is really fundamental lessons that we've learned across the years of just general water investments. So first and foremost, community engagement is really fundamental to informed investments, no matter the scale of the community. And it's essential for several reasons. First and foremost, it's super important for developing support and buy-in for those investments, particularly from the folks who will be ultimately helping to pay for those investments, and especially the long-term maintenance of those investments. And it's essential as well for ensuring that any solutions that are developed are actually meeting the needs of community members, especially those folks who may have been on the outside of decision-making historically and who may most benefit from the investments being made now. We're also finding that engagement really happens best when it's occurring within a planning frame, a community planning frame that involves a number of stages before community engagement happens: pre-analysis, gathering of data and history, And that's really important to sort of maximize your time with those communities before you get in a room with them. We're also finding that the trust that's needed for effective community engagement is predicated upon listening and relationship building. It's often the case, understandably, that utilities and governments, when they go into a community space, would like to be seen as having all the answers. In reality, the best approach can be to simply acknowledge and listen to the expertise that's already in the room. The sort of second main area of lessons around this community engagement component of investments is that community stewards, or sort of folks who act as those community leaders or connections to the community, are super important. And that's both on the government side as well as on the community side. Using those stewards to help leverage their relationships to get folks in the room, while at the same time providing resources and other means of support so that community members can actually show up and engage meaningfully, is hugely important to the process. And those folks will really remember those efforts the next time you need to go and seek their input. And then lastly, before I turn it over to Mami for her insights, is that all of this work is really key to understanding issues and priorities. The issues that might seem to be the biggest priorities prior to community engagement may in fact not even be top of mind for communities. There's a certain community we worked with recently in South Carolina where we had our own little mental list of all these compliance needs that needed to be addressed, and we needed to go after SRF dollars for. This was on the drinking water side, but the lesson's still there. And in the end, upon discovery and reaching out to the folks within the community, we found that it was really the high iron content within their water that was coming out of their taps that was of utmost concern. And that actually didn't rise to the top as a compliance need, but we could have spent all this money or tried to access all this money to meet those compliance needs. And in the end, no one's going to use the water because we haven't addressed what's top of mind. So these are just critical to making sure that that decisions are being made in complete alignment with the communities that they're meant to serve. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mami.
The next lesson that that we've learned is related to what Paula just discussed, is that the needs of communities are often quite layered, especially EJ communities, and this requires a layered approach in providing technical assistance or any kind of assistance. And also that it's important to keep in mind, given the layered nature of needs, is to try to do no harm in the work that you do. For example, in some communities, there's the risk of either market driven displacement or even politically driven displacement. A lot of EJ communities or environmental justice communities work within fraught political contexts. And so, that it is to try to do no harm means really understanding through engagement, what might be the best priority actions to take and best investments to take. Another part of that is that in order to address the layered needs of communities, we've been finding that it's important for us to fill a kind of but-for need. Before that, some communities can even access federal funding or technical assistance, they have some kinds of barriers that need to be addressed financially around just even replacing a pump before, that's driving fines and fees that may preclude their ability to concentrate on longer term needs. And so, and then they may also have needs around understanding their system that don't even allow them to get to, any kind of proposal. And so the Alliance is really fortunate to have an active and broad set of members and partners who are stepping up in this moment. Our philanthropic partners sometimes help us to provide critical but-for funding, and our Water Equity Network members are also we have a large network of folks who utilities and community members who are partners with them that are prioritizing infrastructure investment, climate action, and water workforce. which advances regional capacity, knowledge, and cross-sector relationships and practices. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm just going to say the last lesson and, stop there. But that all types of partnerships can be useful at different times. And so cultivating relationships is fundamental to everybody who's engaged in this work. And we'd be happy to, talk more about this at any point and continue the discussion if you'd like to follow up. We have a lot to say on the topic of partnerships, but I'll pass it back to Paula.
Thanks so much, Mami. Really appreciate it. So we next we're going to hear directly from several folks who are on the call who are working to secure SRF dollars for projects within their communities. So today we have three folks that I'm really looking forward to hearing from. Mayor Andy Schor from Lansing, Michigan, Mayor Jacqueline Izzo from Rome, New York, and Holly Rosenthal, who's an Assistant Director of Finance and Administration from the Phoenix City Water Services Department. So welcome all. And oh, great. Now I see all four of you. Good to meet you all. Thank you so much for being here. So I'm actually going to dive right into Mayor Izzo first, if that's okay. So Mayor, your city's water resource recovery facility recently received an award from the EPA for its innovation and its impact. The project, just as for everyone's benefit, installed an organic waste receiving station for dairy and grease waste and involved a partnership with Chobani Yogurt. And we'd love for you to talk about what made this project successful and how you forged this partnership on the private side.
Well, thank you for having me. The City of Rome's facility was underloaded after the loss of Griffiths Air Force Base. We had a really large base here that housed B-52 bombers. That was in the 90s. So the operators of our facility, we saw an opportunity to utilize some of that excess capacity to try co-digestion, understanding that our local dairy had needs for sustainable and reliable disposable outlets. Working with New York State DEC, operators started a pilot program, innovating with existing technology to begin to accepting whey from yogurt manufacturing, Chobani. Taking the waste benefited the local business as well as the city, we see biogas, a renewable source production, climb with digestion of the waste. The project was successful both due to federal and state grant financing support, which offset the capital investment of the project. Our project was awarded CWSRF hardship financing at 0%. We also had a $3 million WIA grant, a $2 million GIGP grant, and a $1 million NYSERDA grant. We work to utilize and repurpose our existing infrastructure as much as possible to limit capital expenditure and make use of what was existing on site. City officials and WRRF operators were heavily involved in the project planning, design, and construction. And as the ultimate owners of the project, we made decisions that were best for the city's infrastructure.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Mayor Schor, thank you for being here today as well. So the City of Lansing recently received recognition from the EPA for an impactful project that involved, a partnership with the Lansing Board of Water and Light to address untreated sewage overflow. Could you discuss this project and how this partnership was formed, and maybe strategies you can share with some of the other folks on the line?
Sure. Well, the Lansing Board of Water and Light, they do all of our, as it sounds, water and electrical. So we have two major waterways that go through our city: the Red Cedar River and the Grand River. And we have an older infrastructure. We're an older city. We have older infrastructure, and we had water sewage. We had untreated sewage overflowing into the Grand and Red Cedar Rivers. So we partnered with our Board of Water and Light to create this project to reduce that, to separate sewer and water through our combined sewer overflow project. This is something we've been doing for a while, but the grant, the recognition we received was for about 14,500 linear feet of sanitary sewer to separate the combined sewers and eliminate the overflows that go into our rivers, and help to reduce the frequency of sewer backups into basements of homes and residential businesses, especially when it rains a lot. We would see backups, and residents don't appreciate when there's sewage backup coming into their basements. We had applied for a whole variety of Clean Water State Revolving Fund loans since the early 90s, and to date, the program has we've removed about 950 million gallons of sewage overflow to the Grand River and to the Red Cedar Rivers, covering 5,000 acres. So the collaboration between the City of Lansing and the Lansing Board of Water and Light, we combine resources into one project. We've been doing it separately. We provide combined resources into one project to separate the sewers owned by the city and replace the water main owned by the Lansing Board of Water and Light. Total cost was $517,000. We received a 20-year CWSRF loan, and we financed the CSO portion of the project, and the water main portion was paid for by the Lansing Board of Water and Light. So the partnership helped us to be more efficient, to draw down dollars, to get these loans that we need, because we again have challenges paying for that through our road funding or through our general funds. So being able to utilize this loan allows a city like Lansing, which doesn't have the funding to do this, to actually get these resources fixed, to be environmental, to satisfy requirements federally, to ensure our residents don't have backups, and to prevent sewage flowing into our rivers. And I know my whole staff in our public service division is on, and I want to thank them because they did all the hard work. I'm just the guy telling you about it.
Great. Thank you so much, Mayor. And my next question is for Holly, and with the city of Phoenix. You all had an ambitious goal of converting up to 60 million gallons of wastewater into drinking water every day by 2030. Could you discuss this effort, what your role is in this project, and again, any insights from this work that you might share with the folks on the phone?
Sure. We're much earlier in our process than the other two cities. But as you said, it's a very ambitious intention. And let me just start with a little bit of introduction. So the city of Phoenix is the 5th largest city in the United States, and it has about 1.7 million residents on the water side, and about 2.5 million residents to whom we serve waste, or from whom we collect wastewater. Our plant, the 91st Avenue plant, which is the plant that we're going to be talking about, treats about 140 to 145 million gallons per day on average. And currently, what's really interesting about that site, that facility, is that we pretty much make use of 100% of all of our byproducts that are created on that site. And we do it in a lot of different ways. We send water to the only inland nuclear power plant in the country. We have a wetland that we use for water polishing. We send some water to irrigation districts, and we have a partnership for methane use. So we, right now, and for sludge, we also send that off to farmers for non-edible crops. So you may have heard that we are in the desert and we have some challenges. The city of Phoenix doesn't have the most significant challenges of the city valleys in the city of cities in the Valley of the Sun. We have a very strong water resource portfolio that's a product of decades of planning and effort and strategy from people who came long before me. But in this moment, with the support of our Mayor Kate Gallego, we are launching this initiative for advanced water purification at the 91st Avenue wastewater treatment plant. Right now, that facility is a partnership of 5 Valley cities, and we're talking to other Valley cities about joining in the effort. My role as part of a really collaborative executive team is to be part of the discussion for the governance of this facility in the future, and then look at different scenarios for funding what will be a massive investment in this advanced water purification infrastructure, and one of the earliest in the country.
Excellent, thank you. Ambitious is a good word to describe what y'all are doing. It's really exciting. So I have a question for really all of you. Someone call out that's moved by this question, but to what extent has community engagement played a role in the planning and implementation of your project? And maybe what are some strategies and tactics that you utilize to ensure broad buy-in from the communities that will potentially be supporting some of this work?
We actually had several community forums where we had meetings with our residents. We also did environmental reviews, financial reviews, and bonding, then public resolutions authorizing the project. So our counselors were involved as well. We wanted a well-rounded grouping, and we wanted the community to understand what we were trying to accomplish, which in the end, we hope will take the facility off the grid and eventually save the taxpayers money, while also helping our customers who have to dispose of dairy products like whey. So we also did media. So we kept updating the community on the successful grant applications that we were able to secure, the construction status, and then of course our project awards. We're a climate smart community, so we really are pretty dedicated to finding sustainable solutions, and we like to keep the community involved in those discussions.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other responses to that question?
We do similar thing. We have for all of our sewer separation projects, we host public neighborhood meetings. We share information and request feedback from the community on the impacts of the project. Certainly, again, people don't want things going back, sewage in their basements and environmentally sound. They don't want it in their rivers. So we talk about all of that, the impacts of the project in terms of construction. When you separate sewer lines, you have to shut down roads. And people, of course, always want to know when they can't get to their house, or when there's going to be a delay or some orange barrels. Here in Michigan, there's always orange barrels. The positive is that when you replace a road and go into the ground, you get a new road. And again, here in Michigan, that's a big deal. But we create FAQ documents. We share them with the community and neighborhood groups. We do social media pages for community members to follow the project and ask questions in real time. And we make it a priority to attend and present feedback sessions in the neighborhoods, especially those that are historically disadvantaged and underserved. So you can hear their opinions. You can go to them. You don't make them come to city council and have to get daycare and things. You can go to them and hear opinions. And again, we're always going to hear them, especially when there's traffic involved, or new roads, or environmentals, or other things. So community engagement is real important.
Thank you.
And,
Holly?
yeah, we're very early in that process, but we have engaged a consultant to work side by side with us as we move forward. But we're already out in the community and telling the story and working. Very recently, we had a proposed rate increase that we were successful in getting, and we did a lot of public outreach, and we did have questions about that program in those meetings. And one of the stories that we tell is that the people all over the world are doing what we're proposing every day. So for those of you who aren't as familiar with our term, advanced water purification is the use of wastewater effluent and highly purifying it to drinking water standards. And so I'm sure there's places in Michigan where there's a river, where your community is on a river, and the people upstream are discharging their effluent into a river, and then you're picking that up in your drinking water plant, and you're purifying that to meet EPA standards. And that's exactly what we'll be doing, only less naturally. We'll be taking the effluent directly from our wastewater plant and ultra purifying it before we blend it back into the drinking water system. So we feel like that's a good way to ease people into the idea and consideration, and then we'll be doing much more robust efforts as we move along.
Thank you so much, Holly. Definitely in Philadelphia, where I live, that is the case. We are downstream of a lot of wastewater treatment plants here in Philly. So this next question again is for all of you. How did you work with the state on this project? And to what extent was state coordination helpful and effective while you were seeking funds for these projects that you've talked about here today? And again, feel free to, whoever's moved first, please feel free to reach out.
Well, on all of our projects, we try to work closely with our Department of Environmental Conservation. We actually brought them into this one very early in the process because this was a big commitment for our community. This project was around $25 million. So we wanted them to understand exactly what we were going to be doing. And then we also brought in the Environmental Facilities Corporation to look for hardship financing, so 0% interest loans, and then what other types of financing might be out there. And that led to us looking and applying for the other loans or grants that I talked about earlier. We held in-person meetings with them and with other state reviewers. We wanted to explain the project's benefits and the design and why we were doing that. And also, we did a test pilot program first with Chobani to really try to determine, was the need out there that we thought for the waste, and would another private sector business be willing to come to our facility, because they're not really right next to us. And so we took the results of that trial, we did it for over a year, and then we decided to jump in and actually build the biodigester and commit the taxpayers to the large project. So I think that was key, and our state agencies were involved in reviewing all of that data, and I think they appreciated that we took that approach instead of just jumping in and not knowing if this would be viable or not. And so then we were able to deliver a successful project because the agencies were involved with us, and we really didn't have any barriers to our construction. And we actually hosted all of the agencies last year, and they brought some other Department of Health people with them and some other agencies across the state, and they were really very impressed with how everything turned out. And so we have now engaged several other vendors, customers like Hood, Ultra Dairy, Kraft, and they are also bringing their waste to us. So we're trying to build our book of business.
Yeah, we also work closely with our environmental department. We call it the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, which is a new department just created, as you can tell, with it just keeps changing names. But we've got a project manager we work with through the department. We apply and implement the loans and grants. We actually apply, we have a 5-year plan, which we submit to our department. Then we apply for a new loan each year based on the specific needs of that project. Through this partnership, again, we're a little further along than the city of Phoenix, and certainly we're about on par with the city of Rome. But we built a relationship with our environmental department, and since 1992, we've received 23 Clean Water State Revolving Fund loans, and we've done a ton of work to separate our sewers. We're half to 3/4 of the way done. We had a break for about 10 years when the recession hit in the mid-2000s. But when I got elected mayor 5 years ago, we resumed, and we continue to utilize them. So certainly the State Department having faith that we can do it is helpful, and working with them and providing information and providing our 5-year plan, and then year to year providing the specific needs has been extremely successful for the city of Lansing.
And here in Phoenix, we're actually working side by side with the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. There are not currently regulations for what we're proposing. And actually, even until very recently, it was not permitted to use wastewater to create drinking water. And so that barrier has been removed, and now we're working closely with AZDEQ to create the regulations to be able to move this forward. And they're very open to it, as is, and I should give them credit as well, the State Revolving Fund group here in Arizona, the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority of Arizona. You know, they're very open to the considerations that we're proposing and how they can participate.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We just have time for one quick question that's in the chat, and then I'm going to turn it back over to the organizers. So David Gatton asks, specifically for Holly, do you have a general timeline for your water purification project? Years, decades? What are you hoping for?
We're in the process of doing kind of a pilot plant. We had a plant called our Cave Creek Reclamation Plant that was offline as a result of the recession. We had intended to bring that back online, but now we're bringing that back online as an advanced water purification plant. And we would like to have that back online within the next 2 to 3 years. So design is already underway for that plant. And we're kind of, like I said, we're still actively working with Arizona Department of Environmental Quality to be able to know exactly what we're going to build and to make sure that we do that in compliance with their evolving regulations. The larger plant, the 91st Avenue wastewater treatment plant, we're not talking decades, we're talking within the decade. And as you know, that can be very challenging with municipal construction. We know that. But we also know that there is a significant need to broaden our portfolio. Like I mentioned, we have a strong water resource portfolio. About 40% of our water comes from the Central Arizona Project. About 60% of our water comes from the Salt and Verde rivers. So we're not using really any groundwater at this time, very little groundwater. I know there was some national media that spoke to the Phoenix AMA, which is not the city of Phoenix, and their concerns for development within the Phoenix AMA. We have a strong portfolio, but we feel like we need that advanced water purification to boost our portfolio, and that we're going to do that as quickly as we can move things forward.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thanks to our entire panel for sharing their expertise and for being leaders in this space. So thank you all, and I'll turn it back over. As Jamie has said in the remarks in the chat, that the recording slides and links are all shared on the program website with the link provided. And I'll just let David land us home. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Mami, for sharing your guidance with all of us first. And thank you, Paula and Holly and our two mayors for this important discussion today. Please note that we have posted in the chat today a brand new document called 5 Winning Strategies for Cities to Access Financing from the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. You'll also be able to find that in the library section of our website, localinfrastructure.org. But before we end today's session, we'd like to get your thoughts in a second Zoom poll, please. It'll be appearing on your screen right now. And while you're filling out the poll, I want to give you a heads up about our upcoming programming. We'll be hosting another session on flooding on September 12th, and we'll be announcing more sessions soon after that as well. So thank you all for joining us today. We're 1 minute early. We know you're very busy people, and thank you for joining us for this discussion.